Here we go again. According to Basketball Hall of Fame writer and NBA journalist Marc Spears, there are reports of a disconnect between Sacramento Kings veterans and Doug Christie's coaching staff, almost like we're repeating exactly what happened nearly a year ago when Mike Brown was fired. Tristi Rodriguez from NBC Sports joins me to discuss that, plus Scott Perry having to earn the trust of Kings fans for how he handles this upcoming trade deadline. It's all right here for you on Locked On Kings.
You are Locked On Kings, your daily Sacramento Kings podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
And now, ladies and gentlemen, it is that time for another episode of Locked On Kings.
Hello and welcome into Locked On Kings, your podcast hub for Sacramento Kings coverage all season long. This episode is brought to you by Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONNBA for $20 off of your first purchase. My name is Matt George. I have the privilege of being your host here. I'm a Sacramento sports anchor and reporter for ABC 10 News. And today I have the privilege of having a friend of mine who does an amazing job covering the Sacramento Kings, to some extent the Golden State Warriors, the Golden State Valkyries, all sorts of, like the San Francisco 49ers, all sorts of Northern California, Bay Area, and beyond sports over at NBC Sports. Tristi Rodriguez, she does phenomenal work. If you're not following her, not checking out her work, you need to. She's featured a lot, and her work is featured a lot on Sacramento Kings broadcasts, pre, post game, and things of that nature. But Tristi's wonderful, and she always provides a really interesting, really good perspective on what's happening with the Sacramento Kings from her position over there with NBC Sports. So I'm excited to have her on today because I didn't just want to rant and rave about the information that came out in Marc Spears' article. He did an interview with De'Aaron Fox, and De'Aaron talked about how much better things are in San Antonio and things that went wrong in Sacramento. And the only reason he watches Kings basketball is for Keegan Murray. And Marc snuck in a little line or two at the end of the article about this disconnect that is in Sacramento, a reported disconnect, according to sources, between the Kings veterans. He didn't name any names specifically, Kings veterans and Doug Christie's coaching staff. And it just, as soon as I read it, I'm not surprised, but I just rolled my eyes and thought, oh boy, here we go again. So instead of ranting about that by myself, Tristi Rodriguez joins me right now on Locked On Kings. It's tough enough as it is to cover and watch the Sacramento Kings every single day, like most of us Kings fans do. Heck, we don't know any better. It's another thing entirely if you're Tristi Rodriguez to travel all the way from the Bay Area to come down to a Sacramento Kings game to watch what the Kings have been putting us through inside the Golden One Center this season. Tristi Rodriguez, of course, covers the Kings for NBC Sports. You'll see her doing her content that's featured right alongside like the pre and post game show on the same broadcast network that you watch Kings games on. Tristi, 6-20. It's been a interesting start to the season, I suppose, if we want to put it lightly. And now, as expected, all the other stuff is starting to come out with Mike Brown's Knicks and De'Aaron Fox's Spurs playing in tonight's NBA Cup final. They are doing a media tour, and all these articles and stories and quotes are starting to come out, including a article written by the great Marc Spears. And there was a lot in there. He did an interview one-on-one with De'Aaron Fox, and De'Aaron called the grass way greener in San Antonio than it was in Sacramento. Settled stuff about Keegan Murray, blah, blah, blah. But there was a almost just a small nugget of information that Marc just kind of threw in at the end of this story. And it's, well, there's now reportedly a disconnect between the Kings veterans. He didn't name any names specifically, but the Kings veterans and head coach Doug Christie. Almost a year to the day from the time where Mike Brown was fired, and we knew there was a disconnect between Mike Brown and certain veterans and members of the Kings locker room at the time. What do you make of that little nugget that Marc just snuck in there at the end of an article that's supposed to be about De'Aaron Fox?
Yeah, I mean, I think like when you think it can't get any worse for the Sacramento Kings, there's just all these reports that keep coming out, and now the latest one from Marc Spears. To be honest, I'm not surprised. And, you know, as you mentioned, he didn't say any names, so we don't want to speculate. I know the aggregators started throwing out names, and Marc even responded to one of them like, hey, I didn't say any names. So we want to be careful with, you know, how we're approaching this conversation. But I'm not surprised. Like, I think Doug Christie is a great coach and a great mentor and leader for a certain type of player. I think people respect that he played the game, right? We've heard players say that out loud to us. But I just can't imagine a world where a player such as Russell Westbrook, such as DeMar DeRozan, where they came from, what they've been through in their careers, and how they've got to where they are as veteran leaders in the NBA, sitting down in a locker room and hearing Doug Christie. We know Doug Christie is a passionate person. He's a passionate player. He was a passionate player, passionate coach. He does those spiels and those speeches, and, you know, to try to motivate guys. I just can't imagine a world where, again, not to just toss out names, but just, I can't imagine a world where Russell Westbrook, DeMar DeRozan, Zach LaVine are sitting there and like taking that seriously. And again, I don't want to, you know, that's not what Marc Spears reported. I just am trying to put the pieces together, and I can totally understand that would make sense to me. Like, I just can't picture a world where they're sitting there and like, man, like, and again, okay, winning solves everything. So if they were winning, maybe, you know, these Doug Christie passionate pressers and them taking them to the players to the roof and all this stuff to see the beam, like, those things work and, you know, are accepted when they're winning, right? But they have lost 20 games, and I don't think they're sitting in the locker room like, man, we don't want to hear this, you know? So I think, again, Doug Christie, from my perspective, is a great coach to some of the younger guys. You know, he has a close connection with Keon. I know that might have changed this season, but last season I talked to Keon about it, and, you know, he said he really likes Doug. He really respects him, and that he was a player, and obviously Mike Brown wasn't playing him, and Doug was at the time last year. So I think, as I mentioned earlier, I think Doug Christie is a great coach for a certain type of players. So when this report came out from Marc Spears, I'm honestly not surprised.
It doesn't really matter who the names are, to be completely honest with you. Like, yeah. I'm almost glad the names are included, because then that would throw the heat on one or two people. Like, we've seen the fan base feel a certain type of way recently about Zach LaVine. The DeMar DeRozan saga in Sacramento has been not a complete disaster, but it's been a failure. It's been bad. And I think DeMar regrets coming here just as much as the Kings regret going out and getting him. We could talk about Domantas Sabonis, who obviously isn't playing right now, but we know Sabonis was involved in the frustrations with Mike Brown that led to his firing. Not that it was all on Sabonis, but he was part of that. So to me, it's less important about who the disconnect is with, and more the fact that disconnect is still there 12 months later, when it was tried to make out to be it was a Mike Brown problem. Mike Brown lost the locker room. And one of the things that I said, Tristi, coming into this season in defense of Doug, even after people know how I feel about the Mike Brown firing, one of the reasons why I'm upset and was upset that Mike was fired is because I never thought it was a coaching issue. I always thought it was a roster construction issue, and those on the roster who the team chose to go forward with were not the right people to go forward with. So I came into this season with the belief that, like, I don't know if Doug Christie could fail this year, just because if things went wrong, to me, you have to look at the roster first and foremost. And if I said this coming into the season, if we ever heard any rumblings of Doug Christie lost the locker room or these players don't like Doug, then get rid of those players first, because now we're talking about, for lack of a better term, like repeat offenders. This is happening again. But that was for a team that I did not expect to be 6-20 before Christmas time. Like, has Doug failed? Like, is this a failure at all on Doug's part? I know he'll wear some of it. He says, that's my job to do it. I'll stand in front of my players. I'll wear some of it. I don't want to blame Doug, but at the same time, when you have 20 losses this early in the season, like, nobody, I guess, is blameless.
Yeah, I mean, I think that going into the season, even before a single game was played, it's no secret that the Kings had a roster issue. It's a roster construction issue. And I've always said, like, you could have the best coach, Greg Pop, Eric Spoelstra, coaching this team, and I think they still wouldn't be a playoff team.
I agree.
So it's definitely just a roster construction issue. Unfortunately, Doug is going to shoulder the blame. He has, and he probably will continue to do so. But yeah, I'm on the same page. I don't know if he is failing, because again, we hear this what's the word, metaphors, expression all the time, right? A surgeon can only do surgery with the right tools, or whatever. I'm probably butchering it, but Doug Christie can only do his job with the right tools. And this is going off topic a little bit, but the same thing with, going back to De'Aaron Fox. There were reports about, he asked for help, he asked for wing depth, he asked for size, he asked for length. He could only do with what he had around him. It's the same issue with the coaching staff. Doug can only do with what the roster that he has. And I mean, you can only do so much with, people want to say all these things about Keon not playing and Devin Carter not playing after, having a couple good games, some in the G League, some in the regular, or with the big team. But it's just like, what is he supposed to do with 700 million guards? Like, he can only play so many people. And so I don't think it's a failure. I think, unfortunately, he's kind of been the lab rat this season. And to me, I think the real test will start for Doug after the trade deadline. And if the Kings make some moves, we can see what he does with that team.
This episode of the Locked On Kings podcast is brought to you by Skims. When Skims announced they were making underwear for men, the reaction made perfect sense. People have been talking about Skims comfort for years. Most guys, though, stick to whatever they've been buying since college. It drives my wife crazy that I still have some of the same fits from college, the same waistbands that roll, just a whole lot of settling when it comes to your underwear, right? Well, Skims Men's changes that. One upgrade, and it's obvious why everyone has been talking. They're designed to feel good, fit right, and actually stay put. No slipping, no sagging, no adjusting, just genuinely great underwear that makes you feel confident and comfortable. They don't ride up, they don't lose their shape, and they hit exactly what they're supposed to, or where they're supposed to, on your thigh, whether you're working, traveling, working out, hanging out at home, playing around a golf, whatever. These feel better than anything you've used before. I honestly didn't expect underwear to be a game changer. They talk about, like, you spend so much time on your mattress, you want to make sure your mattress is right. You should look at your underwear the same way. You're spending so much time wearing underwear, at least you're supposed to be. How they feel, how they fit, their comfort level, that matters. Shop Skims Men's now at skims.com. And when you place your order, choose podcast in the post-purchase survey and select our show from the drop-down to let them know that we sent you. Plus, the Skims holiday shop is open, so if you're looking for the perfect gift this season, Skims has got you covered. I think it was Sam Amick that put out towards the very beginning of the season some of the contract details of Doug Christie. And I remember reading or seeing those details as essentially 2 years of being, he's probably the lowest paid coach in the league. If not, he's got to be close. Like, he's making, I think, $2 million a year, which is nothing. And then the third year is significantly higher than that, except the third year is a team option. So essentially it's a prove it contract. And I remember that did not make me feel too great for a couple of reasons. Number one is those 2 years of prove it were tied directly to the 2 years that DeMar DeRozan and Zach LaVine were under contract. So essentially Doug was attached to how well he handles the two of them, which I didn't expect to go great. Didn't expect to go this bad, but I didn't expect it to go great. And then that led into the belief of, is Scott Perry hedging his bet a little bit, because he never really, Doug was not his first choice to begin with, and Vivek Ranadive wanted Doug Christie, and then we can go down that rabbit hole of blah, 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 which I know Kings fans are very frightened by and scared by. But I just wonder, what you said there at the end actually gives me a little bit of hope, because we can almost split this season in two. If Scott Perry is able to make the necessary moves this trade deadline, which sounds like it's going to be more difficult than it is easy, but if he's able to make some trades, get some of these veterans out of here, free up the rotation to allow some of the younger guys to play, and see what Doug can do with that group. Maybe Doug will be judged more on that than he is this first half of the season. But I don't think Doug deserves to lose his job. I think Doug losing his job and the Kings going through another coaching search would be nothing but a hindrance to this organization at this point. That being said, it's hard to imagine Doug surviving and keeping his job with the rate of how really, really poorly this season has gone.
Yeah, I mean, I don't disagree. I think the thing is, though, I don't think Doug minds the pressure. I don't think he, I think he kind of knew what he signed up for.
Yeah, I think so too.
And there's, all the things behind the scenes, and, you kind of talked about Vivek Ranadive and all this, the stuff that we hear, the chatter, right? And I think he's been around the organization for decades. He knows how it is around here. He's not going to say it. He'll shoulder the blame. He'll come up to us and say, I need to do a better job. I need to coach better. I need to whatever. I. So it's hard to evaluate. And I think that's why I'm looking so forward to the trade deadline. And again, it's a big if. We don't know if they can even get away from some of these contracts, trade away some of these players. But I think it's very unfair for people who aren't, so focused on the Kings like we are. Like, for example, I talk to my family, my parents, my dad, they're in SoCal. My dad's a Lakers fan, whatever. Sorry, trigger warning. Just having conversations with him, he's like, I don't think Doug Christie's the man for the job. And it's just like, you're not watching Kings games. You don't know the dynamics, and none of us really do. But we hear things, and it's just like, it's so unfair to evaluate Doug in these circumstances. But unfortunately, that's kind of just what he signed up for, and he knows that.
There's very little trust right now between the Kings organization or Kings fan base and really any aspect of the organization. And I think Scott Perry has naturally inherited that mistrust because of ownership, and ownership went out and handpicked Scott for this job. They didn't go through a search or anything like that. It was Scott, and that was it. Like they wanted Scott. They had conversations with Scott basically done before Monty McNair was out the door. So I wonder, like, Scott can't fix everything in a day. And I think he's been very clear with his messaging of this is going to take time. This is going to take time. And patience is a illegal word in Sacramento amongst Kings fans at this point. It's just hard to say that. But I wonder, like, how much Scott has to earn the trust of this fan base by what he does at the trade deadline this year, because he might be right that this takes time. And I understand not wanting to force bad trades or anything like that. But if the Kings go through the trade deadline and make only a small move and don't make some sort of move, whether it's moving DeMar DeRozan, Malik Monk, just something that shakes up the rotation a little bit and moves you closer to actually executing a rebuild, I have a hard time imagining Kings fans are going to treat that with any sort of grace. And I don't necessarily blame them for that. Yeah,
me either. I mean, you can't tell a fan base who's been patient for 2 decades to keep being patient. Like, it's triggering for me. And I've only been covering the team for like 4 or 5 years. So I can't even imagine, talking to Kings fans and just their frustrations. And this is a town who loves their Kings. So I get it. Scott Perry has the reputation. He's respected across the league, but words only go so far. So it's going to be more about the action. I do think he's going to have to prove it. It's unfortunate because, he isn't responsible for all of the roster, but so, like the Zach LaVine stuff, so he does have a lot on his plate that was from the previous front office, but also he did, acquired Dennis Schroeder. He acquired Russell Westbrook. So he added onto the guard gauntlet. And so some of it is on him. And it's kind of just like, so I can understand Kings fans' frustrations with like, yeah, we know this is all on you. Yeah, like, we'll be patient a little longer because we have faith in you because of your reputation and history and all that. But also the start and the moves that he has made haven't been, and I'm not saying, Russ has been great in spurts for the Kings. Dennis has been better, off the bench in his new role, but it's just, some of this does fall on Scott Perry. So I think he definitely does have stuff to prove to the Kings fan base.
And I think there's also a level of like, we'll see what happens with Keon Ellis too, that has this fan base ready to judge Scott Perry based off of if he's able to get this Keon Ellis extension done, or if Keon ends up walking and the Kings kind of ruined that relationship with how this season has gone. We'll have to wait and see with that. But Tristi, where are you at with, like, I understand you want to try and get value for anything that you can. And the Kings, like, their roster is not nearly as bad as their record indicates. They have a lot of talent on this roster. It just clearly doesn't work. Like, it's a disaster together. It's an island of misfit toys. But you want to be able to get some sort of value for like a Malik Monk or a DeMar DeRozan or something for LaVine or Sabonis if you're able to move them. But at the same time, like, I don't blame any Sacramento Kings fans that goes, I'll take pennies. Just get them out of here. Just get them out of here so we can restart, get rid of the headache, free up the rotational spot so that Neat Clifford can play 28 minutes a night and we'll just go for it in that way. Where do you kind of fall on the two opposite ends of that, I guess, spectrum?
I think I understand both sides. I can understand from a fan perspective that you want to be careful and cautious with what you're doing, just because history, you don't want history to repeat itself with, some of the trades that they've done over the past few years. Just for example, De'Aaron Fox, like it still kills me. And I know it kills Kings fans that they just can get a little bit more from San Antonio. And it's just watching that team. It's like, you couldn't get anyone from that. And, again, previous front office. So I don't want to continue to dwell on that, whatever. But it's just like, I understand the cautiousness that fans, want this front office to take, because it's like, yes, we want off DeMar, we want off Zach, whatever. But it's also like, we don't want to lose them for nothing. But I also do get the other side where it's like, well, the only thing exciting about this team right now is the young guys, is, the rookies, is the people that aren't playing. And they're not playing because of these guys who are taking up all the minutes. So I definitely get both sides. I would say, I think I'm a little leaning more towards just the cautious approach, because we don't want to see DeMar go to a team and they make a playoff run, or whatever. And while the Kings are, tanking or whatever. So I'm leaning a little bit more towards that way. But I think Scott Perry, I have a little bit more hope in Scott Perry. I think he isn't the type to just pull the trigger just because he, sees something enticing. I think he'll be very smart about his approach. And I think, we've seen that, and his resume shows that. So I'm leaning a little bit more towards that way, but time will only tell.
I think it's just a fine line to walk, though, if you're Scott, because Kings fans have to understand and remember, and this is difficult, I understand, but Scott has nothing to do with the past. He is here now, and this is his first year. And it's kind of the same way Mike Brown took this job. And Mike would always tell us, I'm here to win. It doesn't matter how long the playoff drought has been. I'm here to win. And he got to the playoffs in his first year, right? Kings fans, we've suffered through the years of malpractice and losing and being terrible. But Scott hasn't necessarily. So Scott's coming in here and going, yes, I have this roster. Very little of it is mine. And the pieces that I want to move, I'm not going to be dumb. I'm going to try and get some sort of value for it. But that being said, if Scott goes to the trade deadline and then comes out in a press conference after the trade deadline where he made one minor move that doesn't really matter, and he goes, well, we just weren't seeing the value that we wanted for some of these guys, it's going to be hard for me not to come on this podcast and go, it's Monty McNair all over again. Because how many times did Monty go through a trade deadline? We wanted to do this, but it wasn't there. We tried, but you're not judged on what you try. You're judged on what you do. And this team is so bad and so flawed that just any change to this roster, I think, is needed, period. Plus, I think you owe it to some of these veterans like a DeMar DeRozan to, hey, it's been a failure here. Go and try and play some meaningful basketball before you hang it up.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think I would love if they did another, we acquired Robin Lopez at the trade deadline and then waived him the next, so I totally get that. But the thing is, that's a very real possibility that Scott Perry could come talk to us in the press conference room and, just give his whole spiel about the 6 pillars and patience. And, we just didn't have and we all kind of inside are going to roll our eyes and just there's not one thing you could have done. Yep. Again, going back to just Scott Perry and his resume, I think he's just in a very difficult position. I don't 100%. Think people are jumping out of their seats for Zach LaVine's contract. I don't know how many people, maybe a little bit more. Some people are enticed and interested in DeMar, but it's just, he's in a really, really tough spot. But I mean, it's his job. I don't doubt that he's making calls and, at least trying. And I was listening to Deuce and Mo's podcast the other day. I think it was yesterday, the day before. And Deuce made a good point that they have the NBA G League showcase or something like that, I think in Florida in a few weeks. And that's the perfect time where, there's no media, no fans allowed, I believe. And it's just a time where execs, front office people just all get into a room and at least the conversations get started or continue. And so I'm not expecting, dumpster fire right away from Sacramento Kings front office. I don't think it's going to be as easy as, we would like it to be. But I think Scott Perry is going to do his due diligence to try and get something done. But at the same time, in the same breath, I can totally see him coming up to us after the February 6th trade deadline and saying, nothing was really moving for us, or we didn't want to, whatever, and give us the whole thing. So I can see it going both ways. It's a really big if, and I don't envy Scott Perry's position.
This episode of the Locked On Kings podcast is brought to you by Game Time. The World Cup is coming back to North America for the first time since 1994, and with 48 teams for the first time ever. It's going to be massive. But let's be honest, getting tickets, that's usually the hardest part. That's why the Game Time app is so clutch. It finally gives fans a real advantage when it comes to snagging seats. With Game Time, you can track price drops in real time, get alerts when great seats open, and buy tickets the moment that they hit the app. It puts the power back in your hands and makes going to the World Cup realistic instead of impossible. All you do is pull up the app. The layout makes it super simple to scroll through different matchups and compare seat views right then and there. You pick a game, tap a section, and you'll have your tickets loaded within minutes. No confusion, no hunting for the fine print. And this is important. The number that you see, the price you see for your seats when you first select your seats, the fees and everything are included in that. So you do not have any late surprises at checkout that add money on top of what you're already wanting to pay. Take the guesswork out of buying World Cup tickets at every match, concert, or event with Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONNBA for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, download the app, make an account, and use code LOCKEDONNBA for $20 off. Swipe, tap, ticket, go, Game Time. Locked On Kings is also brought to you by Robinhood. Nobody knows your money goals better than you. Robinhood puts you in control of your money with tools that work as hard as you do. Locking in every opening, beating your PR, then beating it again. Channel that drive into your money. Robinhood puts you in control of your money. Trade stocks and ETFs, options, futures, and crypto all on one platform. You can now build and execute your own trades from a desktop with Robinhood Legends advanced tools, or take advantage of the new Robinhood Strategies with a tailored portfolio managed by a team of experts. You expect more from yourself, so expect more from your money. Get started today at Robinhood.com/yourmoney. Again, that's Robinhood.com/yourmoney. Your money, your move. Tristi, I have exhausted and annoyed so much of this fan base over the last 12 months, really just about my thoughts and continued commentary on the firing of Mike Brown, how it happened. I said immediately when that move happened that the Kings were back in basketball hell. I'm unfortunately right. I didn't want to be right, but here we are. Everything is played out the way that it is played out. So I'm going to ask you this and to hear your thoughts on it. They don't have to agree with me or be the same as mine, but just for someone else to get a different perspective on Mike Brown, because everybody knows how I feel about it. Mike was asked about his time with the Sacramento Kings when doing the media for the NBA Cup final. And no surprise, because you know Mike as well as I do, like, he took the high route. He thanked Vivek Ranadive for the opportunity in Sacramento, shared all sorts of love for De'Aaron Fox, all sorts of love for the Sacramento Kings fan base. Mike Brown just being Mike Brown. And he was like, people don't understand. And I get called, oh, you just love Mike Brown. You just love Mike Brown. Well, Mike made a very conscious effort with everybody that he was around to meet you in the middle. He was not the kind of coach that's like, you don't know basketball as well as I do, so you're not on my level, shut up. Like, Mike would try and teach you or bring you in. Mike would have very real conversations with me on the side and walk me through what he was trying to do, even if I disagreed with it. I've told the story before of Mike called me hours before a Kings game after criticisms that I had of how he handled Keon Ellis and explained to me why. He didn't have to do that. And some would argue he should never do that. But I'm just giving these as examples because this is the type of person, type of coach that Mike Brown is. And here he is at a time where his former team is 6-20 and he's coaching in the Cup final for a team that's 18-7. He's already been vindicated based off of what has happened. And he has every opportunity with how low-hanging fruit the Kings are to drag the organization, to fire a shot like Mike Malone did in the past. He could talk about how the Kings fired him, having him coach a practice, then talk to the media, and then they fired him over the phone on the way to the airport. Like, he has all the reasons in the world not to take the high road, but he takes the high road. What do you make of really this last year, the entire Mike Brown saga? Here he is in New York, shining. Of course, the Knicks were a good team before Mike got there. That's important to point out. Like, just what do you make of this entire weird chapter in the very sad history of the Sacramento Kings?
Yeah, I mean, I'm not surprised when Mike got the gig with New York. I'm not surprised by their success. Mike is as good of a person as he is a coach. He, the stories that like you just told, I could go on and on about, personal experience I've had with him as well. He would be with us at practice and walking us through, breaking down the offense, the defense, whatever. And he was just such a hands-on coach and just such a great person. And so I'm truly happy for him and his success. Again, I'm not surprised that Mike went his way, De'Aaron went his way, and they're both having success. That shouldn't surprise anybody. And I think him taking the high road with those comments, I know some people, as you just mentioned, like he could go have a scroll of things that he wants to air out for the Sacramento Kings. I would argue that the way he approached that question is a bigger shot in the foot, because you are basically like, if he's, throwing all these digs and disses at the Sacramento Kings, what does that do for him? It doesn't really do anything. He's like, I'm out of that situation. I'm still getting paid. I'm in New York. I'm in a great situation. We're going to the NBA Cup finals. We have a real chance to be Eastern Conference finals, go to the Eastern Conference finals. And even you could argue go to the NBA finals. It's early, so, whatever, but he just saying all these digs and throwing all these jabs at the Sacramento Kings, which if he did would have been totally valid. But I would argue that the way he approached it was even a bigger shot in the foot to the Sacramento Kings. And yeah, I think Mike is a great person. Like, I can't emphasize that enough. And I'm so happy for him and his success. It's just the latest wrinkle of the Sacramento Kings. And it's kind of just, I think it's the NBA gods, or what, maybe that's the wrong term for the Sacramento Kings point of view, but it's picture perfect that De'Aaron Fox is going against Mike Brown in the NBA Cup finals. And, some people are like, oh, who cares? It's the NBA Cup. It's not like it's whatever. But it's pretty telling for Sacramento Kings side of things. So again, I'm not surprised. I wish Mike nothing but the best. And yeah, it's just another thing that the Kings have to live with.
And look, Mike's in New York now, and they're ruthless over there, and he's ultimately being judged on, like, the NBA Cup would be great for him to win. He's ultimately being judged on that team winning an NBA Finals or not. So his work is still to come. I think he knows that too. And we'll see how ultimately it plays out there in New York. That was a scary job to take, because you know what you're signing up for. You're winning a title or you're getting run out of town. That is that job. But Mike's been in that position before with his time with Cleveland and Los Angeles. De'Aaron's comments about Sacramento and the King, well, not really Sacramento, because he's always been pro fans, but the Kings and how everything went down have always been a little more barbed, and he's not been afraid to speak his mind, but that's always been who De'Aaron is. He just says what's on his mind. Then Mike certainly was. He didn't take nearly as high of a road as Mike did, but to your point, the overall tone of what De'Aaron said and what Mike said are the same, which is, I don't really pay attention. Doesn't matter anymore to me. Like,
why would they?
De'Aaron just said, I pay attention literally only for Keegan, which is, we know how close they were. I know some people felt a certain type of way because Malik Monk is still on this Kings team, but regardless, like, the overall theme is the same. Mike is in a way better situation. Doesn't really matter to him what's happening in Sacramento. De'Aaron's in a way better of a situation. Doesn't really matter what's happening in Sacramento. And to me, that's what should resonate with Kings fans, and hopefully should resonate with this Kings organization and their decision makers, is we made the wrong decision. They're thriving to the point where we don't matter to them anymore. Instead of making that about them and being frustrated with them for those comments or how they may or may not feel or what they're saying, essentially the Kings organization needs to look at themselves in the mirror when analyzing this entire situation and go, okay, we know where we screwed up. Hopefully this time we'll learn from it and make sure not to make that mistake again. I'm not holding my breath with this Kings organization, Tristi, because they've made many mistakes before and continue to make mistakes, but hopefully this time they can learn from it. And Scott Perry, who had nothing to do with those decisions, can look at that situation and go, something like that is never going to happen under my watch.
Yeah. I mean, I think that's what it boils down to. It's, as much as it stings for Kings fans to see De'Aaron having the success that he's having and Mike Brown having the success that he's having, we have to kind of just move on from it as they are. And it's totally understandable that you can it still hurts. I understand that, but new front office, just give Scott Perry a year or just some time. And again, I don't think he will make that same mistake. I don't think that he will allow that. But, I don't blame De'Aaron for the comments that he's had ever since leaving the Sacramento Kings. He, I was in his post-game presser in his first game back in Sacramento as a Spur. And of course he was, just hit with a bunch of questions about the Kings. And he answered them gracefully and, truthfully, as we know De'Aaron always does. And I think the last question was like, he responded like, I'm so happy that I got this first one over with because I don't have to like talk about it again. And, even a year later, he's still getting asked about the Sacramento Kings. So I don't blame him for his comments. He's obviously very close with Keegan. Him and Malik, obviously, their friendship fell off. But I don't blame him. I think, again, just another lesson learned for the Sacramento Kings. And under Scott Perry, hopefully that list will not grow any longer.
That's Tristi's very nice way of saying, Matt, time, just move on, Matt. And I've tried to, Tristi. I've tried to move on, but it stings me bad to see those two playing in the NBA Cup final. But it's a new era of Kings basketball. I just hope they learn from it this time. But Tristi, no matter what happens, good or bad, of course, you'll be covering the Kings diligently over there with NBC Sports. Appreciate you making the time here to come on Locked On Kings. We'll do it again soon. I'll see you at the Golden One Center soon. And I don't know what we're hoping for or looking for from this season, but hopefully they give us something a little more enticing to be excited a little bit about the future. Because right now, yikes.
Yeah, I mean, hey, it's the holidays. We can be happy about that, spending time with our family. And, it's a little chilly. I know it's been really cold in Sacramento. It's been cold in the Bay as well. But not as cold as the Sacramento Kings have been playing. So there's always a bright side of things, Matt. We just, got to look at things in a positive light. But thank you so much for having me.